All right, welcome to episode 94 of the Apex Vaulting Podcast. And today we have a great episode for everybody. I'm super pumped about it. We have two awesome guests. I'm going to introduce them, let them talk about themselves a little bit for anybody who doesn't know who they are. We have Shawn Francis and Colin Waitzman on. Shawn, you want to give a little intro for yourself?
Yeah, I've been making pole vault YouTube videos since 2012 and wrote a book 2 years ago called the Pole Vault Toolbox. And yeah, that's really it. Just trying to put pole vault education out into the world and bring more people together through the pole vault.
Yeah, Shawn, you're way too modest. First of all, before we started recording, Colin was like geeking out about how happy he was to do a podcast episode with you, which I guess that leads me to Colin Waitzman. You want to give a little intro for yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Colin Waitzman. I started pole vaulting in 2012 in high school, and I actually was an avid watcher of Shawn's videos for a while, since probably like 2013 or so. So I was back when you have the old Yankees hat, and now you got the new one nowadays. And yeah, so I've been vaulting for a while. I have my own track and field podcast. We talk a lot about pole vault since that's my thing, and yeah, super excited for this conversation and looking, what we can do to help make our sport better.
Just out of curiosity now, I have to ask, Shawn, how did you become a Yankees fan? Are you a Yankees fan or you just like the hat?
Yeah, no, so it's kind of wild. I get this especially everyone hates me unless I'm in New York. That's kind of how it works. My dad was drafted to the Yankees in the 70s.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. So we all grew up Yankees fans. And like when I was a kid, I didn't even know what the symbol meant. I just thought it was like, yeah, it's something my dad wears. So then
right.
It was, yeah, we were all just dressed up in Yankees stuff all the time. So it's almost like an homage to my old man, and it's just like,
that's
yeah. And then because of that, I became a Yankees fan too. And, don't follow it as much as I wish I would, but yeah. That's kind of the story behind that.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people are pumped to hear that. That's a great story, man. I can't even imagine. Like, I unfortunately, I'm probably the best athlete in my family, which is not saying much. We're not an athletic family. So that's awesome. So, I mean, the reason I wanted to have this podcast episode with you guys, first of all, the indoor season is just unbelievable. I think if people wrote a script for the perfect indoor season, this has to be it, because the marks are unbelievable. It's super competitive. It's going back and forth. I feel like on the women's side especially, it's like the minute someone takes the world lead, you're like, oh my God, she just took the world lead. It's like the next minute, the next woman takes the world lead. So it's amazing to see this back and forth. And, I kind of talked to both of you guys and I said, there's a lot of things still up in the air. We're still not sure about the Olympics. Everybody's switching from Nike to Puma. Why is that going on? Does somebody know something? And I wanted to kind of broach the topic with you guys is like, if there wasn't an Olympics this summer, one, is that as bad a news as we think it is? And two, what should the pole vault community do? I guess I'll start with Shawn. What do you think?
I come at it kind of weird. I think the Olympic dream is, I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, but I think it's kind of a joke. They make a lot of money off these athletes. And like for me personally, I look at the pole vault not as an Olympic sport, but more like the surfing and skateboarding community, where sometimes you just want to go to a club and jump. It doesn't even matter how high you are. You just want to hang out with your friends and see how high you can jump that day. And what COVID showed us was that exists even if there isn't any meets. People still want the pole vault. And so I don't think it's as important as we think it is. And I mean, it has, I don't know, I'm kind of torn because it comes every 4 years, but every year we're watching the same guys as we are right now, all jumping in the same meets. They're all jumping the same heights. They're getting better every meet, but it's the same group of guys. So we see the Olympics almost every single week. And so I know the older vaulters in this community are going to hate me for this, but I think the newer ones are like, it's not Russia versus America like it was in the Soviet 80s.
Yeah.
It's different than it is. I think it's changed.
Yeah. So, I mean, before Colin, you answer the question, just to go off of what you said, Shawn, I totally agree with you. I remember tweeting this at least a year ago. It's like, are the Olympics holding us back? Because like you bring up, out of all the sports leagues, it's the only sports league that they have free labor. Like every other sports league, you pay athletes. And yes, if you get the gold, I think it's up to 30 grand or something like that. But most of the field is not getting paid. And it's like you're, almost bending over backwards to try to chase this Olympic dream. Like I remember one time talking to an athlete, I was like, man, could you imagine if like every year there was like a pole vault championship and the winners on the male and female side got like 50, 100 grand. And the person said to me like, oh yeah, that would be good on non-Olympic years. And I'm like, I don't know. Like if I had the opportunity to win, like, and obviously if let's say that championship 100 grand was the winning prize all the way down the line, there would be prize money. It's like, why, I don't know. Like to me, it's like, I almost feel like without it, maybe people will start to open their eyes. And like you said, this past year with COVID and not having, official high school and college meets, you see this sport is surviving through the club system. People do want to jump. They like having fun. They like learning about our event, or even just, hanging out with a bunch of friends and jumping. I think that's there, and it could continue to grow from there. I mean, Colin, what do you think?
Yeah. So I have a lot of different views on it. I think that when it comes to what you mentioned with the Olympic year thing. So I think of it, it's not Olympics, but for hockey, there's this thing, the World Juniors, which is the biggest thing for people that are under like 20 years old in hockey. And it goes on during the wintertime, during like the NHL season, or like right before the NHL season. And a lot of like your top players that are under 20 years old, like they just don't compete in it and they get ready for the NHL. So it's like, oh, that idea of, like not during Olympic years. Well, I mean, in other sports, they don't participate in their biggest thing where you represent your country. And because they have other priorities that are important. So if you have the opportunity to make, $100,000, I think I'd take that over, being able to represent the United States. And, but to go to the other kind of point of how pole vault, I think, can really grow, outside of the Olympics, I think that the vertical jumps and the pole vault specifically has the ability to live, I think, as an individualized sport. Like it's interesting enough, it's cool enough, and like the duration of a pole vaulting event is like the right amount of time where you can have just pole vaulting and watching that, and that can in and of itself be, a sport. It doesn't have, like, if you're going to watch the 100 or the 200, that competition's going to be over in 10, 20 seconds. That's done. But with pole vault, you got like an hour, 2-hour competition if you wanted to have male and female, and it could live on with itself. So I think that now, especially what we saw with the Garden Classic or whatever it was, Backyard Classic with, the Mondo and I think
Renault,
all them did it. Yeah, I think that shows that it's possible that pole vault could live with itself because it's cool enough and it's interesting enough to do it. And so I think that this is starting to show that, hey, if the Olympics is canceled, pole vaulting at least can still live on and grow as a sport.
Yeah, I almost view pole vault, it's like sometimes movies come out and they're not so popular when they first come out, but then they have this cult following that all of a sudden, like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard like The Big Lebowski, but they have apparently a festival every year because it's just so popular. Everybody loved that movie, but it wasn't necessarily like a huge hit right away. And pole vault definitely has that cult following. Like people who are pole vaulters really, really love it and enjoy it. And I know one of the things that I always have been pushing at my club and talking about for the last few years is like this thing about like, it's not just for high school kids to get a scholarship. I think some people look at track and they look at pole vault. It's like, okay, this is our ticket for, our little Sally or our little Johnny to get into this college and get some money. And I think the thing is like, even now through COVID, I've been having adult clients contacting me. And it's funny, this woman, Kelsey, came in last week. I don't think she's 30 yet, but she actually jumped in Minnesota.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. So, and she came in and she had a blast. It was so much fun. Like she's so excited for this weekend. And so like that's the thing. Pole vault does have that kind of cult following, and it can be something that's more popular. And Colin, have you ever been to Reno for the National Pole Vault Summit?
I wish, like I wasn't able to scheduling wise, but that was one event that I was like, I've always wanted to go to because it's so
Well,
cool.
I think that's a perfect example that speaks to what you're talking about, Colin, where Shawn, like, you know, you've obviously been to Reno a bunch of times. How could you explain that scene and how pole vault as a standalone, it functions at Reno, and how that's actually just a sliver of what it could be if we had more events like that, especially someone like Colin who's never been to Reno?
Yeah, I've always described it as it's the Disneyland for pole vaulters. Like,
Yeah.
there's no better place on earth when you're there for those few days, because like pole vaulters are a little weird and kind of kooky, and however you want to describe them, extreme sports.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll go hang upside down anywhere they can find. And so you go to a place where all of those people are all in the same building, hotel, restaurants. You just feed off that, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's that feeling I love about this sport, and I'm sharing it with this giant group of people.
Right.
And there's not a lot of those, like the Texas Expos, and I want to get down there and see what that one feels like. But I would imagine it's similar, because yeah, you really can't put it into words. Like, how do you explain Disneyland if you've never been there? You just think there's a giant mouse running around,
Yeah. Well, I know for me, it's just, when you're in the stands and every single person is watching the competition and, watching, like, you even hear these little conversations where it's like, oh, that guy dropped the pole too quick on, too early on his carry, or
Yeah.
that guy didn't jump up, or that guy's got to go up a pole. And like, everybody gets just so excited, you know what I mean? And we're all kind of providing our own commentary as we're watching it. And we finally are around people that actually care. Cause I don't know how, your experiences, guys, but like, I know sometimes, like, I might, come home from a big meet and maybe I want to tell my brother about it, you know what I mean? But he could care less. Like, did you win? That's good, man. Congrats. Like, he doesn't care about the decisions of going up poles, down poles, and you're around that environment. And that's why I always tell people, for me, I think that a big thing about displaying the pole vault to others and to bring people in the sport is to explain these little parts, to have a crowd understand. It's like, okay, that person didn't clear the bar that time, but they've got a crucial decision. The pole bent a lot. Are they going to go up 5 pounds? Oh no, what this guy's saying, maybe he's skipping going up 10 pounds, big jump. Let's see what happens. That's the stuff where it's like, now we sit back and we're waiting. Oh my God, what is going to happen with anticipation? And that's something I think happens in Reno because everybody's so knowledgeable that we're all having these conversations as we watch. And then we even like peek over like, oh, he went back into his bag. He's pulling something else out. Let's see what happens, So I think that's where you can really build off of it if there was even more events like that, but also more commentary, I think.
Yeah. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for growth within explaining like some of these things. One that I can look into recently is during the American Track League with Sandy Morris, and the commentators like, hey, like, it seems like every time she's going up, they're mentioning it, but like, hey, like Sandy Morris is on longer poles, which means that, this is something she's never done before, and it's going to be more difficult, and it's like a higher risk, higher reward because she's getting ready for the Olympics. The Olympics is in a couple months if it happens. And so it's like, hey, if you're going to do this, it's like, this can either go really bad or this will go really well. Now, they don't say it exactly like that, but that's essentially what they're saying. And it's interesting because it's like, it's saying like, hey, she's taking this opportunity, which could go really well or could go really poorly, because she knows that the ceiling of getting better is greater. And so I was like, yeah, like, I mean, I don't know exactly like the actual explaining of it. It could be better for people that don't know what that means, like what the sport is. But I think saying that and letting people know, like, this is like a meta, like tell people what the meta is in the pole vault, how it's not just who clears the highest bar. There's different things going on during the competition that are pretty interesting as well.
So 2 things, right? One, I think you bring up a great example, and I feel like sometimes in track, we almost try to avoid almost controversial topics, but it's like even that idea of like, oh my God, she is taking a risk. She's trying to get on a bigger pole. This might not go well. You know what I mean? Whereas like other sports, and, Shawn, we talked about it before the podcast, you recommended the documentary Unchained, which is about freestyle motocross. There, it's like, they're highly advertising. This is super dangerous and it's super crazy. Like these people are taking risks to put on a great show. And, you know, I don't think pole vault is on par with that risk wise, but you have to play that up. I mean, people are flying through the air at, you know, 16 plus feet, you know, whether it's male or female, and that there is a risk there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, these people are brave. They're laying it all out on the line. You know,
well, that's part of what makes this sport exciting is there is a risk factor to it for sure. And I don't think it's played up enough, you know. I mean, there was that push, you know, with box collars and people dying and, you know, a few years ago, and it happens in all sports, and you know, it's part of what, I don't know. I'm a snowboarder. I jump out of airplanes. Like I like that type of stuff too, and that's what draws me to pole vault in a way too. So I think we just need to talk about that. If you move up this pole and it doesn't work, you know, you have a very, like you were saying, a very small line to either get rejected or fly into a standard or not. And that's why these athletes are as incredible as they are, because they can narrow that focus and harness that energy to go the direction they want and the height they want, which I don't hear that being talked that way very often.
Yeah. One thing when you bring that up, it brings me back in my memory. I can't remember the year. I think it was 2013 or maybe it was earlier, but with Stephen Hooker, the Australian pole vaulter, where the fact that the sport was so dangerous and that he almost, you know, got severely injured multiple times by nearly falling and missing the pit multiple times. We had a guy who at the time, he was Olympic champion, 2008. And he was one of the top vaulters in the entire world, stopped competing at the peak of his ability, just retired from the competition. It was like it would be, for those that don't know what pole vault would be, it'd be like this, when Andrew Luck retired from, you know, being a quarterback. You had one of the biggest names in your sport retiring at his peak because of injury or the threat of injury. And it was just like, all right, let's keep it moving. We have Renaud Lavillenie who's up next and has the opportunity to win, you know, back to back. Like, wait a minute, like you had his biggest competition just said, I'm hanging up the spikes, and then he just went off in the sunset. We're not going to talk about that. I think it's something that would be interesting.
It's funny that you bring up Renaud. It's like Renaud, the day he broke the world record was also the same day he got rejected like 20 feet. You know,
and he broke his foot and like it was gross.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Shawn, you know, look, you jumped 18 plus, you've placed very high at USAs, you've been to international competitions. I mean, what would you say is not like you brought up something that's not talked about enough is the risk, but like, what are some of those intimate details that you feel like are not touched upon enough with like competition and what you as an athlete have to go through when you're at that level?
Yeah. I mean, that's hard because I don't necessarily know where to go from here, because like my other job is I have to know who I'm talking to, my audience, and I don't always know who the audience is who we're speaking to. Like, are the people watching these American track leagues pole vault people who know everything about pole vault, and you can talk about the numbers and the stats, and hey, they moved up 2 inches in grip, and you know, they moved back 6 inches in run, and they moved up 10 pounds of pole because they're feeling really good now. Whereas if you talk to somebody like with American Track League on ESPN who's never seen the sport before, they might have no idea what's going on. But what this kind of reminds me of is when there was that the last Olympics, there was Renaud and Thiago, yeah, and they were jumping together, and there was people who I haven't talked to in years who were like, I watched the pole vault and it was so cool just watching these guys go back and forth. And you know, he passed a bar. I can't believe he passed they're getting in just to the rules, and I think that kind of just gets you in. And that's what I like is what's happening with American Track League, is it's at least creating an opportunity for people who haven't seen the sport to be able to see it again. And I think it's like football. As you get the basics, then you can kind of dive deeper into that rabbit hole and figure it out. But I don't know if you can start at the bottom of the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It might just like, this sport's weird and I'm out of here.
No, totally. I think obviously like there's ways to present it where you give the basics, you know, you obviously like, it's almost like I remember UFC a few years ago. It's like before every fight, like, you know, during the whole pay-per-view, they'd be like, all right, this is a 3-round fight. There's 5 minutes per round. This is how you score points, just so that the fan who's new knows the basics. And then like, while it's actually unfolding, that's where I think you do throw in like, hey, Shawn, that was a big jump. Like, are you making any changes for the next bar? And you're like, well, like I haven't been on this pole, but I really want to try it. I think this is what I need. This is where it's like you could get that little extra in between the jumps. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you need both, for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
You have to, one thing that's like, I think that you mentioned pretty perfectly there, Shawn, is like, who is the market and the target audience for us to expand? Because I think if you want to expand within people that are track aficionados, like for me, and I'm sure both of you, like, I don't care what the meet is, like when it is, like if it's a good pole vaulting competition, I'm watching it. Like if I have an opportunity to watch it, I'm going to watch it. But if you want to get the people that are like super casual fans, like, oh yeah, I ran track in high school, or, oh yeah, like I go on weekend runs. Like, let's take a look at what this is. And like, oh, track and field, American track league. That sounds interesting. Let's take a look. Like, if you want to get that fan invested in the sport, like, I think that you gotta really make it, simplified of like, hey, this bar up there, it's not 5 meters 20. Like, no one knows what that means. Like, this is the height of your average giraffe. And he's taking this stick and he's putting it in the ground and he's jumping over that. That's what they're doing. And they're like, yep, I know what a giraffe is. That's impressive. And then be like, good, dumb it down. And then once as you get farther on in the competition, you can kind of use more technical terms. But I think you got to start with like really simple for a sport that's very complicated.
I feel like I literally could see an ESPN promo that they've done for other sports that's like that. Like, I could see a guy with a mic walking up to a giraffe and be like, wow. He goes, today, everyone's going to be going higher than this. And then cut to like a jump, I definitely think that's big. And here's another thought. Like, Shawn, you started the podcast by bringing up the Olympics and how it kind of holds us back a little bit. Here's the other thing that I kind of feel like, I think part of the problem with producing a track meet is you have multiple sports under one umbrella. Yeah. And the thing is, like, I feel like as a pole vault community, we need to start thinking about ways to do it on our own. Because I think that would go a long way. Because I think part of the difficulty with even commentating at a track meet is like, well, you need someone that has a general knowledge of all the events, but they probably don't have specific knowledge in any one event in particular. And so it's going to be really hard to give in-depth, commentary. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I think you're right. I mean, I remember reading stuff about Sandy trying to talk about the other events at the American Track League, and I felt so bad for her because she's a pole vaulter first, and she just didn't have the depth. And I think that's just super common, and that's what happens to the pole vault all the time. Is you got these guys who are they're high jumpers, like Dwight Stone, or like some sprinters, and they're just like, oh my God, how they just, it's like someone seeing it new for the very first time, and trying to comment on it. And so, yeah, I think you're right, where it seems like there are street meets trying. It's difficult. And so it's like there just needs to be maybe a group that gets together of clubs, because they already have businesses in place, that can help support these meets. And then they already have facilities where maybe can travel and grow from there. But like, it's hard to run street meets, and it's hard to run a pole vault meet at itself,
Right. So I have a couple of thoughts, and I have an idea on how to do a meet, but like, I think the big thing, and when I hear people talk who, let's say, are trying to chase that Olympic dream, and they're willing to put, basically 10 years of their life on hold to try to do this. One of the things that I'm trying to put out as an idea is like, start a club. Start small. It could just be at the place that you train at, maybe the college or the high school, right? And you start building up clientele, because while you're also chasing this Olympic dream, maybe you could start a business. You know what I mean? And now, you start making a living off of pole vaulting while you're training, and you also are, doing a great service by giving back to people and teaching them this sport, and growing also your market. Because now, by you starting that club, you're basically creating fans of you. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, let's say you're an 18 plus guy, or, a 14-6 plus a woman, and you start this club, all of a sudden you have 50, 100 clients. Well, those are actually 100 fans. They want to see you jump, and one of the things that I kind of thought about was like, think about bands that play at bars, right? They go and they hit up a bar. They want to do, let's say, Friday or Thursday night or whatever the case may be. imagine like, you know, and everybody's got their own bar in their head that they can see in their local area. It's got to have a big enough parking lot, but you can go to the bar and be like, listen, I think if you let us put on this meet, we can draw a lot of people in for the night. Then you cut a deal like a band does. You get a percentage of all the drinks and food that are ordered that night. And you put on a little mini meet with the top talent in your area. I think everybody thinks super big and they're always like, oh my God, we need Mondo here. And it's like, no, even if like, I remember having Chase Brandon on the podcast. And I was like, Chase, he was saying like the indoor facility they used to train in was a short runway. I'm like, who cares? People seeing you jump 16 from short are going to be thrilled. And imagine that bar scene. It's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, if I was like kind of like talking to the 5 guys and 5 girls that are going to jump that night, I'd be like, listen, first of all, compete. Like if you miss a bar, look pissed. If you make a bar and you took the lead, get pumped and put on a show. You're putting on a show. Don't worry if you don't PR tonight. That's not the biggest deal. And obviously like you let them know it's like whoever wins gets a bigger, you know, cut of the pot, you know? And all of a sudden now it's like a little bit of money's coming in. You guys get to put on a little show, create more fans. And now little by little, it's like eventually it gets to the point where you don't even have to go to the bar. You could just put on an event at your club and people will come to the club to come watch. I mean, these are just some thoughts that I have of like ground level, how to grow it, you know?
No, they're great ideas. Like, so there was this meet in Minneapolis a couple years back called Brits Pub. And so for people who don't know, they put a raised runway on top of a bar that they had lawn darts up there, but right in the middle of Minneapolis. And then literally right next to it was the whole bar. And people would just walk in from the streets downtown Minneapolis going, whoa, saw some guy flying through the air on top of this thing. They'd have a drink and they would sit down on the lawn, just like it would blow their mind. And so with that idea, there was this, so I'm coming around on this, I promise you here. So we were in Arizona at another time and they had a rodeo right behind the bar. So you could pay $10 and you could get your drunk friend on a bull and they could just see how long they could stay on, right? But people would come just to watch people try to ride this bull. So like I had this idea, like, why can't you just have a pole vault meet every single day of the week while people come to the bar and check it? There's like so many ideas that could work. I think a lot of us are just so stuck into that Olympic almost idea. Like we have to do it for this, and this is the school, and this is our sport. And it's going to take a couple people to kick down the door and try something new and show that it works. You know, so it's drastically different, like jumping on a skateboard.
Well,
that was.
I was
gonna say, that was a great trend back when it was going on a couple of years ago. Like, and so I think it's like looking at the pole vault differently as an art form, because it's, you know, it is in certain aspects. Like I remember when Renault, he was literally hurdled over like 3 hurdles while with a pole, and then he pole vaulted, and then he did a backflip into the pit. And I'm just like, what is, I can't hurdle. 2, I can't do a backflip. 3, I can't vault 16 feet. So you did 3 things I can't do, and I've been doing this sport for years. And then now you show this to someone who's never seen this in their life. They're going to be like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. So I think using it as an art form to be able to show like, hey, you don't have to be Mondo. You don't have to get someone that has appearance fees to make this be a cool sport. I remember when I was in when it did Winston-Salem Street Vault way back in the day, like 2014. I think you actually were there. I tried to get.
Yeah, I was there. I was at that one.
Yeah, like I remember it was super cool because like you're in the middle of a street. There's like bars all over the place, and you have random people just walking down the town. Like, wait, what the heck is this? I just saw someone jump over that light post essentially. And then now they're stopping and watching it. And then maybe they go up to the person at the DJ desk saying, how can I get involved in this? Or how can I get my son involved in this or daughter involved in this? And then now you got your newest person in your club. Like, I think it's using it in public spaces so people can be exposed to it and they can actually see, wow, that person just jumped over what would be, you know, the traffic light. That's incredible. Like, I think having that and not really saying, hey, if I don't have an Olympic gold, I'm not worth even being a professional. Like, you know, there's so many ways you could be a professional vaulter making more money than someone that is, you know, trying to go for Olympic gold, I think.
No, the opportunity thing is huge. And even just listening to you talk about like the different ways to jump, like kind of make it a skills competition, almost like an all-star game for pole vault.
Yeah, like a dunk contest
Something
type
that's
thing.
like, to even have that happen before the main comp, you know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah.
skills portion, and then the rest of the people jump for height. But yeah, there's so many opportunities. And I think kind of going back to that Olympic thing, I think part of the thing that holds people back too is like, they're like, well, if the marks aren't going to count, I don't want to compete. What if I hit a high mark?
Yeah.
And my thing is, I've always said, is like, listen, if you hit a high mark and you're at a meet that doesn't, it doesn't count, well, don't worry. You'll hit it when it matters. I mean, why wouldn't you hit it again? If you're good enough, you'll hit it again. I don't know. That's always been my impression. But I think that's something that holds people back too, because they're so worried if they hit a big mark and it doesn't count. And I feel like that holds people back from competing, I mean, what were the things that you would hear, Shawn, when you were jumping? Like, why would some people go to certain meets and why wouldn't they go to others? Like, what were the things that were holding people back from competing more?
Money and marks. Like it's really that simple. Like we're struggling. Like I'm not not pole vaulting anymore, but when I was, you're struggling just to figure out, all right, I need $1,000 for a plane ticket and another couple $100 for a hotel and then food. And then if I win, I can pay for all of that. And if I don't, I'm going to be in the hole for a while. And then who knows what I'm doing next week. And there's a lot of that going on. So I really do think it's a lot of the money kind of. I know there's the Olympic gold and that's a cool goal to chase. And it's really awesome. And it's old and it's just kind of in our blood, as Americans and things like that. But there's that other side where, hey, it'd be cool if I can do the thing I love and have it, pay my way of life at the same time. And I think having an Olympic medal gives you a lot more opportunities to make that money. But if there was more opportunities to make money for these elites or clubs or anything else like that, then I think people would go, well, there's only 3 Olympic medals, but there's a ton of meets we can go to, so they might change the way they're, digesting that information. And
yeah, I mean, I think, to me, I feel like the answer is like thinking locally. Like we always think so big in the pole vault community. We're thinking about the Olympics. We're thinking about even like something like Reno. Like we need more Renos, but it's like to have more Renos, even we have to have more local events. And if you can get more local support, then it's like there's opportunity to do bigger events more often. But I think it's got to start locally. And I think that's the thing. Like imagine if like instead of getting on a plane and having to fly to a meet, it was like, no, you just drove 20 minutes down the road to the local place and you jumped. And sure, if you won, that was awesome, but it didn't cost you much to go. And maybe there's more prize money for a little bit further down than just winning. And then it makes more financial sense even, because I think you're bringing up a good point. It's like the money is what stops a lot of people. Like I can't remember all the names of people that were like on the cusp that had to stop because of the financial aspect.
For sure. And I was lucky. My parents let me live with them rent free for years,
Yeah.
But and then I knew that I had to jump at least 19 feet to get some kind of a sponsorship. And then you find out they're not as great as they make it out to be. So then like that really was like, well, if I can't jump 19 feet tomorrow, I'm going to find other ways to, connect with, people and maybe show them a side of the sport that isn't around. And that's how the vlog just kind of kept going the way it was. Like, no one's showing this. Look how cool this is. Look what's going on in the hotel room behind the scenes. Look how we're, trying to sleep, but we can't because we were in an ice bath until 2 a.m., like that kind of stuff. So like, I didn't really have the business sense at the time, but I just knew that I couldn't do it the old way. I had to find some other way.
No. And I think that's why I think the pole vault community owes a lot to you, because you got people to start thinking different. I know, I've told you, Shawn, like you made me think differently about social media, because especially 10 years ago, I was like so not on social media. I would like never post, never think about it. It's just whoever's in front of me and that's it, right? But in order for the sport to get bigger and even for you to give opportunities for yourself, like, one of the things that I'm going to do once we kind of wrap wrap up our conversation is I got some fan questions that I would love for you guys to answer. Is that's even just a huge thing for me, is like that people reach out now from all over the country asking questions, and I'm able to help those people, which also, and again, I know some people don't like to talk about it, but that creates business opportunities too. That's why, like, you've done clinics and camps, I've been able to do a bunch of stuff. And I think even just locally, because of my social media, it brings more people into the club, because now it's like the parents don't have to even worry about, well, what does this place look like? How does he coach? Like, they just go on YouTube, they can see what we do at practice. And Colin, I wanted to ask you, I was thinking about this earlier, but this connects to what I'm saying right now. Is like, you started this Track World News podcast, also Innovators Anonymous. What has it been like for you? Have you been getting more listeners? Are people enjoying it? What's your feedback? Because I think, obviously, Shawn, you've gotten amazing feedback over the years. People have loved what you've put out there. What are you hearing, Colin, from your fan base?
Yeah, it's been exciting. I've enjoyed it, mainly because I just love talking about track and field, and I really wanted to get involved with it. There's a lot of vlogs or whatever or commentary that I watch on YouTube of other athletes doing other sports. So I was like, hey, I want to do that, but do my own thing with it. And yeah, I've had some pretty good responses to it recently. I've done fairly well. We went from being an unranked podcast to ranked 75 in the United States for running, which was really cool. So it's been improving ever so slightly. And yeah, I've had a few people that are not only just listeners that I've never met and have no idea who they are, that have messaged me saying, hey, I really enjoy what you're doing. And making it be someone that's not my buddy that I made listen to my podcast, but it's actually someone that's like, yeah, this guy lives in California and he just found my show and he's like, yeah, it's super cool. It's awesome. And then I've also had something else that's cool is our athletes that are actually currently running. I've recently had a few professional hurdlers that have, and other runners that have been guests on my show. And they're like, I love that, we don't just have the big major companies. I'm sure who they are that cover our sport. And then we have some of the smaller guys and like you talking about me saying, yeah, you're bringing new light to our sport and I really appreciate it. And so it feels good. It's a very small market right now, hopefully expanding, but it's nice to see that, I'm getting some good constructive criticism and slowly growing over time. But I think there's huge opportunities because going off on a little bit on a tangent, running just itself is the biggest market that pretty much almost everyone does. I'm sure every one of us have 3 or 4 or 5 friends that are like, oh yeah, I love to go out on runs every single morning. Okay. I'm like, that's fantastic. Who's your favorite runner? I don't know. But if someone's like, oh yeah, I love to go play basketball. I shoot hoops every single day. Oh, okay. Who's your favorite basketball player? Oh, LeBron James. Oh, Kevin Durant. Be like, wait a minute. So you go running every single day, or you just play basketball on the weekend. You have your favorite basketball player. You don't have a favorite runner. I think there's areas of opportunity to be able to connect the two that I think that have gone long overdue for various reasons. But that's on another tangent that I'm sure.
Well, I think you bring up something that's huge and something I've thought about a lot. I do feel like sometimes in the track world, because like you said, running itself is so popular. But the thing is, the sport isn't really that popular because people can't name any runners. And I think sometimes even in the pole vault community, I don't think people realize that it's if they really want to get their name out there, they've got to do more stuff. They've got to go on your podcast, they've got to go on other people's podcasts. They've got to put themselves out there. And the more we put ourselves out there, the more fans that we'll have. I think, Shawn, you're a great example. How many fans did you have over the years while you were jumping? And, it's not, you didn't break the world record, you know what I mean? But it's you're a huge name, what could you say about that, Shawn? Reflecting back, and like you said, you knew you had to do it differently than everybody else. That gave us the reason why you did it. But what did you notice? What happened because you started the vlog?
Yeah. Well, I met people like Colin, He was taught. I mean, he was just. You just meet a lot of people you wouldn't have been able to meet in the first. It just opened a lot of doors. You know, my wife and I got married 2 years ago this summer, and I would say half of the people I invited were people I've met through the vlogs, which is insane to think about. Like they saw me at Reno, they came up, they wanted to do a camp, and then I stayed at their house. We got real close, and then it was like, oh my God, you need to come to my wedding. You know, like that wouldn't have happened. Me and you met because of the vlog too. You know,
Right.
So it not just from a fan business sense, but for me, it's been really just cool bringing more people like me around me, you know, like it just attracted the right people. And just to touch on Colin's thing about runners, it's interesting because we were talking about earlier about how we have surfers and skateboarders, and I think pole vaulters kind of in that category.
Mm-hmm.
Where runners can name their favorite type of shoe before they could name their favorite type of runner.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the difference. Like a pole vaulter could name their favorite pole vaulter probably. You know, it's probably Mondo right now. You know, Mondo or Sandy, you know, are probably the two most popular male and female pole vaulters. But I think running is more. It's just a whole different sport altogether. So like I don't know if they pay as much attention to the elites as like the pole vault community does, or the throwers, or even the high jumpers. They're going to want to, how is this guy jumping? What's the style? There's a technical side to it instead of just a grit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Someone I think is really, I mean, you mentioned Mondo. I think he's doing fantastic, especially recently. I think he has the potential to kind of escape just the pole vaulting world. I mean, we saw, like, looking at just recent things, just yesterday, 2 days ago, when he had a filter on Instagram from Red Bull, like that's crazy. Like, that's crazy exposure that you're having, you know, one of the biggest energy drink companies, a very big company and well-known, especially in the extreme sports realm, is giving you a filter, you know, on Instagram, another huge platform. And then he also is, he has the documentary that should be coming out that hopefully I'm really looking forward to it. You know, the Born to Fly documentary. And on top of that, he's also just so happens to be a super great pole vaulter that is, you know, #1 in the world. And he's also like pretty relatable too. I mean, he looks like your average guy. He's not like a giant, massive person. Like, oh, I can't relate to him. It's like, oh no, I look like that. He can do that. That's incredible. So it's like, I think he has an opportunity to really break out of this pole vaulting like world because he markets himself really well. Like you had mentioned, like you have to do other things, and he's doing other things, and he's reaping the benefits of him, you know, putting himself out there and actually, you know, hey, let me do these other interviews, or, you know, let me allow this documentary to happen. So I think that's something that's super positive, and hopefully will open up other doors for other vaulters that may not be world record holders, but are also, you know, maybe have an interesting backstory on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's super important, is finding ways to connect with people, you know, like Shawn said, whether it's like just personal connection and making lifelong friends, which I think is very important, but then also just to grow the sport too. And the more people you can connect with, you never know how it comes back. Like I heard someone give this analogy. They're like, sometimes people think about like helping out like in the wrong way. They're thinking like, oh, it's like throwing a med ball against the wall. If I help someone out, it comes right back and I get help back right away. He goes, no, think of it like throwing the med ball over the wall, and that med ball never comes back. But maybe a year later, 5 different med balls come back over the wall. And that's the thing. I feel that far too often, like sometimes even some of the ideas that we've talked about, you know, like opening up a club, coaching some athletes, whatever. People start, and because they don't reap a reward like right away, they're like, oh, this isn't working. But it's like, it's going to take time. You know, it's going to take time. Like, I'm sure even like, you know, Colin and Shawn, I mean, both you can speak to this, but when you both started, like you started your podcast, Colin, and Shawn, you started the vlog. I don't know, like, was it immediate? Like, did you guys get all of a sudden like big numbers right away? And I'm sure in the beginning, I know I thought this with a lot of my social media stuff. I'm like, why am I wasting my time? Like, I could be doing something else right now. Like, I don't have to be recording a podcast. I don't have to be making this drill video progression, you know? I mean, how did you guys feel when you first started this stuff? Because for me, I hope that what I really want to do with this podcast episode is I hope it inspires others to do more stuff like this, you know, so it's more than just a handful of people that are kind of creating content.
Yeah, I always wondered why there wasn't more vlogs, like pole vault vlogs out there. There's a few, they make it like 6 episodes and then they're done. And I get it, video editing and like all storytelling and, you know, filming your life is not easy and it's time consuming.
Yeah.
But like the motivation for me always came from, so I know I told this in one of your other podcasts, but I started the vlog initially because I went to school in Fargo, North Dakota at NDSU. And there was a group of kids there I was working with for 4 years while I was up there. And then when I came down to Minnesota to train, there was like this guilt in me that I just left these kids, you know, and before they could graduate. So I was like, I'm going to make a video every week, show them what I'm doing, and hopefully like inspires them to keep training, you know, and then I can stay in touch. And then from that, like I had no idea the pole vault community would jump on board, and they didn't right away, but you know, all of a sudden there was like 30 views, and the next week there's 100. And then, you know, you see your first 100 views on a video, you're just like, 100 people, you think of that many people in a room and it kind of like blows your mind, like that's a lot of people. And then it just kept growing from there, and then, you know, people start sharing it on websites and things like that, and it just grows. But for me, it didn't feel like a lot of work most of the time. It just felt like, oh, look what I get to share with everyone. I got some weird footage this week, or this is going to be fun to I got a new fart joke I want to test out. So I think that's the difference. If you go into anything looking for extrinsic motivation right off the bat, it's probably doomed to fail. But if it's coming from an internal place where even if you can't name what it is, but you just, there's this saying called Cottywomple. I don't know if you guys have ever heard it, but it means passionately going in an unknown direction. So like you're just going and you don't know where it's going, but you're going to trust that kind of gut feeling.
Yeah.
And so I've operated best when I operate from there versus trying to figure out the business sides of things and, you know, marketing and whatever that just, when I operate authentically, things just seem to work out. And then that's the reward in itself, because I enjoy doing it.
Yeah. It's, since I'm still fairly new in the podcasting thing, still haven't hit a year officially yet. Will in a few months. It's like, I thought when I was going to do it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have my first few episodes. I'm going to be probably top 20 in the charts, like within the first like 2-3 weeks. I'll probably have like 5,000 people at least listen to every episode. And maybe like 20 or 30% of them will want to give me $10 a month to listen to, you know, extra stuff, like, and then I'll be great. And that's just when I get started. I'll probably be making $30,000 by the end of year 2. And then like very quickly, I was like, oh no, that's not even remotely close to what I thought it was going to be. Like, and it was very quickly that I realized, okay, like, don't be doing this like for extrinsic motivations. Like, I want to talk to the people that I want to talk to, that I think are interesting. And then I want to talk about the interesting topics within our sport that I enjoy. And of course, I'm going to, you know, make sure that I reach out to my audience and say, hey, is this stuff that you like having? Like, should I continue? Like, and obviously view numbers will tell you pretty quickly. It's like, oh, that got, you know, half the views I normally get. Maybe let's adjust things here. Or, oh, this episode did really well. Let me, you know, look at that again. So I think once I've very quickly, because it happened after like 2 episodes, got it out of my head that, okay, you're not going to blow up and be the next big thing.
You're not going to be Joe Rogan.
Yeah, no. Once I realized very quickly I'm not going to be Joe Rogan, I was like, okay, let me go back to doing exactly what I want to do and doing it because, you know, I like to create content. And it's just been so much more rewarding not being like, I need to have 50,000 views in 5 hours or this is a waste of time. And once I've figured that out, I was like, yeah, I enjoy this a lot more.
It's so easy to get trapped on the numbers. Like,
yes.
I used to do that too. Oh man, it's rough. Like I had to put a lock on my computer at one point, so I couldn't look at the stats. It was bad.
I'm right there with you.
Well, so what's interesting too is like, I always think it, like you have to be trying to think about who you're trying to help and what they need. Like you said, it's like, okay, well, one, you enjoy doing this track podcast, so that you're going to focus on the things that you like to do. And then as you notice what people start to like, you're like, oh, okay, like, let me do more of that because they're enjoying it more, right? Like I've always thought about my coaching in that way. It's like, okay, like I'm trying to make sure that every person that comes in has the best time that they could have jumping, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And when I first went full time with the business, I had already had like about 30, 40 clients. And in 2010, I started the club in this facility in Oakland, New Jersey, which it was like maybe 34,000 square feet. It was a big turf area, and they had a strip of track. And that's where the pole vault area was. And I gave those guys a percentage of whatever I brought in. And this is so crazy, right? But this is the type of person I am. I'm like, even like, forget about my clients, the owners of that building or that business. I was like, I need to show them that I'm valuable. So I did what most people would never do. I lied and said I made more money than I did the first few months. I could give them a bigger cut. But by the end of that year, because I was coaching every single day, you know, even if it was just one person showing up that day, I didn't care. And I would even I would advertise all these hours, and I would just sit there. If nobody showed up, I would just sit there and wait for the next session where there was maybe 1 or 2 people coming. And I was just always there. And by the end of that year, I had about 70, 80 clients, and I was in there year round. And I remember some of the coaches in that facility, they started coming up to me and they're like asking me like, Bronco, how did you get your clients? Like, what was the trick? Like, did you send an email blast? Did you send postcards to houses? Like, did you put flyers in a mall parking lot? Like, they all wanted to know some kind of like easy trick, right? Like just send
sauce
to 5,000 people and, you'll get 100 clients. And it's like, no, not at all. I mean, first of all, I think most of my business has always been word of mouth, you know what I mean? And it's just making sure that the person in front of me has a great time. And I remember in particular, they had a couple guys coming in who were ex-New York Giants, right? They're these NFL guys, and, they would get clients at first just because they were NFL guys. But, right, you have this big NFL guy, used to NFL stuff, and he's got maybe 10 kids that are ranging from 8 to 12 years old. And the complete lack of enthusiasm these guys had to work with those kids, because they wanted to work with like high school football players and get them ready for college. And it's like, no, they got this. And instead of giving those kids a great time, it's like that group of 10 turned to 8. A couple weeks later, it turned to like 6. A couple weeks later, it was 3. And then it was like those guys would leave the facility. They weren't coaching anymore. And so, again, like, and I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. Like, I think obviously I do talk about business, and I do talk about having maybe a little bit more business sense, but I agree with both of you, and especially Shawn. You've got to be serving others. Like, you've got to be trying to provide people a great experience, and that has to come from a place where you enjoy doing it. Like, I love coaching pole vault. I mean, heck, I wish there were more big pole vault events. I wish there were more pole vault meets, because even I'll tell you what, like, and I'm sure, Shawn, we've talked about it over the phone. Like, the pole vault club championship meet that I've had at my club the last couple of years, obviously not this past summer, but, we have a DJ, a food truck. There's over 100 competitors. We're managing the standards, and, I have people working the front desk and this and that. I love it, and I'm grateful, but it is a bear. It is hard to manage that meet. If someone else would do it, I would just bring my club to it. But what I was finding over the years, there's not enough of that, So I'm just, almost to me, it's like, I think of everybody being a pole vault nut like I am, and like trying to provide me with more experience,
Yeah. I think you nailed it, man. Well, and talking about your meet too, like you do it right. I've had like a bunch of people come up, like, I'm going to that meet because did you hear about the belt you get if you win the thing? Where else do you get a belt like that instead of like a little trophy, that ends up breaking on the way home? So yeah, but it really it seems like it always comes back to just good relationships and, helping people. I mean, that's what all good businesses are built on, I think, is providing or helping a need, or accomplishing a need, helping somebody, accomplish that versus, there are businesses out there that'll trick you, but they don't last very long.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, I don't know any pole vaulter in this sport that is trying to just make money quick. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say. Something else that's like super difficult with our sport is like the upfront cost. If you're trying to start everything from new is insane. Like my favorite thing to do when I was in high school would be like my friends would like say like, oh, like how much, like, oh, that's a nice pole. I'm like, yeah, don't mess with it. And they're like, why? Just like get a new, like, I'm like, take a guess how much you think this like 14-foot, tube of fiberglass is. And they're like, probably like 60, $70. I'm like, not even close. Like try like, timesing that by 4 or whatever.
Yeah, and I need 8 of them.
Yeah. And so it's like the price of admission can be super high. And so a lot of the times, like you get a lot of areas, especially underprivileged areas where the high school might not be able to fund pole vaulting, or they might have a pit from the 70s where if you land in the center, you're going to hit the ground and it's not safe. Or they can only have 3 poles and one of them's a 12-foot 130 and then the next one's a 15-foot 180. And so then you just got kids, using inefficient things. And so that's another thing that's super hard about our sport. And I don't know how you could lower, the price of admission because, I mean, they're expensive products to make to begin with, but that's one thing that stinks because it's like, oh, I want to, get involved in this sport. Okay, well, you're gonna have to, if you want to have a pole vault pit in your backyard, I hope that you have a spare $90,000 for you to get everything. Probably more than that. You're gonna have to have, a plethora of money to be able to have, a full setup. So it's like super difficult for certain people that are interested, but might not be able to.
That's why I'm so big on like the whole club system, because I think for the person who's the club owner, you can make a living, owning a club and running a club. And that way the club kind of helps pay for all that, and everybody just pays their piece, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really big too. Like sometimes I hear about clubs that are charging like super big amounts of money, and I'm like, no, that's not the way to do this. Like you want to make this as cheap as possible and try to charge on par with something like a CrossFit gym, right? If you're on par with the price of something like that, I mean, CrossFit's already showed that price point, it works, and you're going to get clients and people are going to want to do it. And I mean, not for nothing. I mean, I guess I have a biased opinion. I think pole vaulting's more fun than CrossFit, but you know what I mean? Like that's what I think about that. And the other thing that I'll bring up, and like you bring up underprivileged schools, and this is a great idea for anybody who has a club, or even if you don't have a club, you could definitely start advertising this. We started a couple of years ago our Rent-A-Coach program at Apex, where an Apex coach will go to a high school. We just charge $100 a day, but obviously you can figure out whatever's a fair price for you. And we go to the high school, we'll bring poles even if need be, and we coach the kids. I mean, one high school, they almost did it like a tryout the first day I showed up. They had 50 kids try pole vault. And let me tell you, that's different than coaching 10 kids at a practice session. Yeah. But we did it, and so many kids got a chance to try pole vaulting. And then they kind of, the team itself weeded it down to like 10 kids, and they stuck with it. But it's like as a club, we've now formed relationships with numerous high schools that never before would have had pole vaulters are now experiencing pole vault. Those kids have joined our club as well, which is awesome. And now these high school track teams and coaches don't view the club as a negative, like, oh, that's that private coach, he just wants your money. It's like, oh no, Bronco's great, Apex is great, like they help us out. And now it changes that perception. And I'm really big. I mean, like in New Jersey, like, the Newark schools, I developed relationships with those coaches, and they know, they hit me up whenever they have a kid that wants to try pole vault, and they know they have a home at Apex, which now those kids get to try the sport, which they obviously end up enjoying a lot. One of my guys that was from Newark, he now coaches himself, and he's coaching a couple college kids, so that's amazing,
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get into it. Like I've heard a lot of people go, well, I was coaching at a high school. I asked the high school if I could run a summer track program. So I built enough money to buy 3 more poles that summer. And then we did it again the next summer. And then we got 3 more poles, and all of a sudden we have a line of poles. So now I have enough money to charge and get more kids in there. And then that's just kind of how the money grows until you're like, well, now we just need a pit. Well, because I've been doing this last couple of summers, I have enough for a pit and a facility. Or
Right.
they stick it in their backyard, which is what a lot of people
Yeah.
start off doing.
Yeah.
And then they build some kind of a facility where, you can add the weights, and, you have like what you have, Bronco. And yeah, it does have an expensive entry, but high schools have been really, I haven't heard of a lot of high schools who say no to something like that. They're like, yeah, if you're going to provide opportunities for kids to continue to do sport, yes, yeah. What do I have to do? Do I just have to get out of your way? You just have to sign this, that you're not going to kill anybody. All right, cool. You sign that. Good to go.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's and it does take a lot of time, but people just need to start.
Yeah.
There's no good time to start except right now.
Right.
That's what I've figured over the years.
Did anybody have a topic that they wanted to cover that we haven't covered yet?
No, I just like talking to you guys, so I'm good.
Yeah, there's
I wanted to go to some of these fan questions. If you don't have, Colin, did you have something else you wanted to
No,
bring?
I was gonna say, yeah, I think we've got. I'm sure if I sat here long enough, I could think of a ton of things. But yeah, let's get into the questions. Let's answer what the people want to know.
Sure. So first question. This comes from a high school vaulter. He asked, I have a question. Is it beneficial for athletes to watch pros and top tier athletes how they jump during their meets to learn in their free time, or will it hurt them? Like, is watching professional pole vaulting going to help or hurt a high school athlete? What do you guys think?
Can we go first?
Yeah, you can start.
I think it helps for sure. It shows there's a lot of variety, one to jump, and then it to me, it gives you some mental reps, right? So I got my master's in biomechanics, and there was a section of that time where I had to do sports psychology, and there was this research paper I remember reading where they go, if you can watch something long enough, like if you think about doing a bench press, you will get stronger even if you don't do the bench press. It was insane because the neural connections were connected to make you be able to fire your muscles faster based on that. So the same idea happens is visualizing other people jumping will help kind of put that technique and download it into your brain a little bit. Whether you can do it or not is a whole different story, but at least
Right. Yeah.
I think it is beneficial. I don't know. I think was part of the question at a meet. I wouldn't do it at a meet, but I don't know if I heard that part.
Yeah.
I might have heard that
Might have
wrong.
been a typo or something from.
Okay.
From that.
Yeah. So
Yeah. No,
not at a meet, but yeah, do it. Watch other vaulters.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely extremely helpful. Like at all, not every single one of my practice, but a lot of my practices in high school, not as much high school because I was at the club. Like, so yeah, so actually, yeah, when I was at clubs, I did. And then especially in college, because I think of it mostly in college, like we would have like videos where it would be like coach's eye video of me vaulting. And then right next to it would be, another vaulter that does whatever skill I'm trying to improve really well. So it's like, okay, here's a vaulter that has a really good takeoff. Here's a vaulter that has a really good invert, or, whatever it is. And so it'd be like, hey, this is a skill that I need to improve on. Let me watch someone that does it at an extremely high level, so I can try to replicate or emulate that in whatever way my body type will allow. Because this is someone that clearly does it very well if you're competing, at the world stage. So yeah, it's extremely helpful. I'd guess if you'd say where it could potentially be hurtful would be like if you're trying to replicate something that your skill's just not even close to doing. Like if you're currently straight pole vaulting, there's no reason that you're like, I need to have this big, huge takeoff like Bubka does because, he does it and he jumps high. It's like, well, if you try to do a big takeoff and on a straight pole, it's going to be difficult. And so it's like, where you currently are at, like, and then you look at skills that they do. Like, hey, don't look at a full jump from Bubka when you're straight poling. Look at a straight pole vault that he does and try to emulate that skill. So it's like watch like for like, because if you try to watch, one skill and it's a different thing, it's going to be like it's just not going to work out. So make sure you're comparing, like for like, I would say.
Right, and it's got to be like progressive. I think too often it's like someone who's a beginner vaulter. It's like I got to look exactly like this person jumping 19 feet, and it's like right, but you're jumping 9.6, so it's like that. It's similar, not maybe exactly the same. And yeah, I totally agree. I think the more jumping people watch, the better their eye gets. Like here's the thing, like Colin's bringing up, it's like, if you, let's say you're trying to work on your takeoff or jumping up at takeoff, whatever the case may be, it's like, well, do you know what that looks like? Can you point it out in other vaulters? Can you see when other people maybe aren't hitting it as well, you know, and who's better or worse? Like if I, you know, it's like this week, I had some professional vault video that I took from Instagram, and I was like showing the club kids. I'm like, all right, who here, you know, has the best takeoff? You know, you guys pick. Right? Because people are better and worse. And it was great to see how it's like they started to identify the precursors, like, okay, this one's doing this, and that's why their takeoff's better. This one's doing that, and that's hurting their takeoff. And it's great because you can see their mind working. And so the more video you watch and the more you can kind of take it apart, I think the better. So I think we're all yes.
It helps you become self-aware, and the more self-aware you are in any aspect of life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be pole vaulting, but the more that you're self-aware of what you're doing, it's only gonna help you improve. Like there were so many times where I would jump and I'd be like, I know that I had a bad takeoff because I could feel it, because I've watched it a million times done the right way. And so like I watched it done a million times done the right way. I do it. My coach says, you know, that feeling that you just had, that's the right feeling. And so when I do it and I don't have that feeling, I'm like, that's the wrong feeling. So then you don't even need the videos at certain points. They're helpful, but you'll know, like, I did it wrong because I watched it done right. I knew what it felt to do it right, and I didn't get that same feeling. So they're extremely helpful, especially.
Yeah, I tell athletes that all the time. That's a skill in and of itself, is like when you could watch someone and you'd be like, oh, I know how that feels. Because some people are more talented with that, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I'll go to the next question. So this is a college athlete. He asked, I have a good one for this. What's more important in everyone's opinion? Speed or technique in the air, i.e. flyaway push-off? So the way I'm interpreting this is, what's more responsible for your push-off? You know, your speed or your technique? What do you guys think?
I know I got a quote from one of Shawn's videos that speed is the enemy of technique. So I remember that from a while ago, and it's true. But you need to have a certain amount of speed. You need to you want to be as fast as you can be under control, because the faster you get, the more control you lose. But also the slower you get, the less, you know, the smaller poles you're going to be able to be on, and the less energy you have going into the vault. So it's like a mixture of both. But if I were to say, would you rather be extremely technically sound but god slow, or extremely fast but have terrible technique? I'd rather be slow but technically gifted, because one, that's safer because you're under control better, and two, I'd say there are ways you can jump higher by having good technique, and it's easier to get faster than it is to be more technically sound. But yeah.
See, I disagree. I'm a slow guy, so I'd much rather be really, really fast.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shawn.
Yeah, I might. If the result is just getting a lot of pop off the pole, I would choose speed over technique. I think I've seen so many multi-event athletes, and I've coached a lot of them over the years, where zero technique but super fast, and they almost did a barrel roll backflip over the top of the bar. And all the other vaulters, we had some slower vaulters, and they're like, how do you even do that? Well, you put a lot of energy into the pole, and energy is speed. But I think you nailed it, Colin, that speed's the enemy of technique, but what you're striving for is the maximum amount of speed that you can control. And you nailed it. Yeah, because you do need both, obviously. But I think people usually try to add speed too quick and too early, and that's where things start to get sketchy and dangerous, and things break.
Well,
Bodies and technique.
Shawn, to back up what you're saying too, I remember the first year I was coaching college pole vault, there was this kid from Fairleigh Dickinson University. He was on a 15, gripping 14.6, and he jumped 15.9, which that's pretty good. Like you're popping off the top, right? He didn't turn.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But like to agree with Colin, it gets sketchy. Those multi
Right,
guys, they're
sure.
the most fun to watch because they're the scariest to
It's
watch.
unpredictable.
But yeah, but yeah,
That's an event we need. It's like multis only pole vault. We just highlight that.
yeah, they're getting too good. We need to bring in a new guy.
Well, so I also kind of looked at this question and I was thinking of it from a training perspective. And, you know, again, I think speed is super important. If you have enough speed, you will have a better push off. And obviously the faster you are, the more potential for a higher push off. But obviously technique goes a long way as well. I think the great thing for athletes is you could do both. You could strength and condition and get faster and stronger, and you can also work on your technique at the same time. I think sometimes though, as athletes, you know, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, you almost get stuck in a mindset as an athlete, like either or. Like, I'm going to really focus on my training right now and get really fast and strong and like screw the pole vault. Like, I'll still keep jumping, but I know if I hit better training numbers, I'll get better. Or it's like, you're like, all right, forget my training. I got to really just figure out this technical stuff. And it's like, I feel like there's you can blend both of those mindsets. I don't think it has to be either or, but I do see athletes sometimes that get caught in that. What do you guys think about that?
I think you nailed it. I think early on technique is going to improve your heights faster, just because the pole vault's so hard to learn. There's so much technique to learn that if you just learn how to plant right, you're going to jump a foot higher. You know,
Right.
It goes really quick. As you get towards the other end of the spectrum, like where I was, like as an elite pole vaulter, it was a combination of both. But a lot of the days it was, all right, there's 3 speed days. There's 2 vault days and there's a recovery day. And then Saturdays are like, let's see how you're feeling. It's probably a tempo day where you might throw up, you know, that's kind of how it was.
Right.
So yeah, it is for sure a combination of both, but I think that range matters based on where you are in your pole vault, you know, journey, lifespan, however you want to say it.
Yeah, you pretty much said exactly what I was going to go for, where I think that if I were, depending on where you are as a vaulter, so if you're just getting started, I'd say you really want to learn and get your technique because you want to have good habits. And because the second you start learning to flag and you're just okay with it because you're bringing down this, you know, 10 500 meter speed down the runway, yeah, you're running super fast, but you're going to create a ceiling for yourself because your technique has been, you know, like halted at a certain point. And so I would say, hey, if you're early on, like make sure that your technique is, you know, pretty solid. You have a good base. And then, you know, as you're adding more speed to it, then it's going to be able to where you're adding them at the same time. And especially if you're in college and if you've been doing this for 4 or 5 years as a vaulter, like you're going to want to make sure that you're doing both of them at the same time, because if your speed's going to, you know, if you stop focusing on your speed, but your technique gets great, you're not going to be able to maybe increase on your poles as you like. Or if your speed gets really good, but your technique lacks, like you might be building bad habits. So it's a mixture of both. You definitely need to do both of them, for sure.
I think an interesting thing though is if you look at like Jeff Hartwig, he was getting slower at the end of his career, but his technique was still getting better and he was still jumping higher. So it's like you never stop learning technique in the sport.
Exactly.
It's the problem you'll never solve, you know, pole vault. And that's what keeps it so fun and addicting, I think, is that you learn something new and then, you know, it changes everything. You meet a new kid who might be short and fast and another one who's tall and slower and they jump completely different, but the physics is the same. And that's where it's just a constant puzzle of technical learning that you're going to be doing your entire pole vault career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I even just to add to that, and then I'll get to the next question. I think the thing is, like, you could literally be doing the same drill, focused on the same skill, but because of the level or stage you are in your development, even your mental approach is different, you know, and you can figure it out in a new way. It's almost like reading a book for the 10th time or watching a movie for the 10th time. It's like you see things or understand things that you didn't understand or see before. And so there's always that next level, you know, of the puzzle. Let's see what you guys think about this one. I got an emailed question and it said, I think this is from a parent. I've heard many coaches talk about using mid-marks. Do you have any information explaining how to find a mid-mark and how to use it? I have a daughter who has been vaulting for 6 years and my son for 3 years. Coaches in our area, or perhaps it's high school coaches, use the takeoff mark, not a mid-mark. Both my kids have a tendency to take off under. My son's back was recently injured, and I believe it's related to him being ripped off the ground. I think utilizing a mid-mark could help troubleshoot their approach, but I'm not sure how to find it. Any information you can provide would be appreciated. I mean, I'm going to send her a mid chart, but what do you guys think about that?
Well, what mid-mark do you guys use? Do you use 3 out or four out?
Four. I use 4 at the club.
Okay. Colin, did you use mid-marks?
So I'm a guy, I never even knew what they meant. I was just like, my coach would be like, yeah, your mid was 52. I'm like, no idea what that means, but thanks, coach. Like I just like, I didn't focus on it as much because my run was super, super consistent. Like I was always on like every single time. Like, so it was just like great, glad to hear it. It's the same thing it always was. So I didn't really focus on it and never really knew what they meant. Like I know it's like,
you'd be the guy I was like, hey, catch my mid, and let's say my mid's supposed to be like 48, you'd be like 24, and I'd be like, what? There's no way. Like what are you watching?
I was like, it was good though. I swear it was perfect. Yeah, so I'm not the best person to say if it's on or not. But when it comes to the takeoffs, I know that very well, and back injuries because I injured my back as well. But when it comes to mid-marks, yeah, I think you guys are a little bit better versed on the importance of it. So I'll let you guys kind of take that one.
Go ahead.
So it's just another tool to put in your toolbox, so to say.
Yeah.
I never used mid-marks until I moved back down to Minnesota and started jumping with the University of Minnesota coaches. And what we found was I didn't think I needed them because my takeoff step was always in the right spot. But I was really good at putting my foot where it needed to go. Just like, long jumpers do the same thing. They kind of steer, where their foot's supposed to go. They say don't look at the board, but everyone looks at the board. That's kind of the idea behind it. Yeah. And so what we were finding was my mid-mark was moving around a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so when that happened, it was like, well, what's going on in the first half of my run so I could hit this consistently, Right. And I have a weird little skip in my approach too. So what we did was with the skip, we added one more mark I had to hit. And then if the mid mark was on, and it made everything way more consistent. But what you find is, if you hit, say you're taking off at 13 feet or something, 12 feet, let's go high school kids, like 12 feet, you can hit it, leaning back a little bit and you're hitting the brakes, or you can hit it really good where you're leaning forward and you're putting propulsive forces into the ground, or you just hit it dead on. And so there's a lot of ways to still hit that same mark that can screw up a back or a shoulder or something like that. So yeah, mid marks can help if you know how to use them, but I'll let you explain how you find mid marks.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that I would say also is like going off of what you just said, you could sometimes just catch takeoff and you're like, oh my God, you're under 6 inches, move back. You're under again, move back. You're under again, move back. And before you know it, now the person's like overstriding to get to takeoff. And then, I mean, talk about, you could easily hurt your back there lunging into it, right? And now you have no impulse to really like move that pole and you get stood up. So there's a lot of issues there. And like you said, the mid-mark is just an additional tool. And even what you said, Shawn, like about how you guys were able to now start to like watch the beginning of the run versus the middle and end, and how you kind of developed that run because you were good at steering. You were able to get that foot in the same spot. I think that's where the mid becomes super important because you can catch the mid and it develops your coaching eye. So for the person who asked this question, I think this is an important tool. I've even mentioned to people, like I recently spoke to a coach who I was like, listen, like, you're constantly recording everything on the iPad. And the thing is, you're not watching the run. Like you have to watch the run. Like if you need it recorded, that's great. Have somebody else record it. You know what I mean? But like watch the run and try to see this development, right? Because now you can help the athlete more. The other thing that I would add is like, I think the mid-mark can help, but if athletes are taking off under over and over and over again, you really got to start one left out two left out, and develop that out takeoff if that's what you're looking for to try to alleviate some of the stress on the back. Because I know exactly what this parent's talking about. There's just some people that they'll just run into it. So it's like the only way you're going to break that is by literally drilling it into them. You have to do a one left, make sure they jump before the pole hits the back of the box, right? Then you do it from two left, and then they get comfortable from three left, and hopefully that helps. The other thing that I would add is, like, I think volume is a big cause of injury. You know, when we have too many jumps, too much of a heavy volume, because we're trying to fix the jump, and we're like, okay, if we just fix it, you won't have back pain, or if we just fix it, you'll jump from out. But the thing is, if you start to go too much in volume, that's where you're going to have back issues, no matter how good your takeoff is. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Midmark, for what I do know of it, is that it'll show you which part of your run you're having issues with. So if it's like, hey, if it's like, hey, you're spot on because you're steering at the end, but you're early on your Midmark, or you're behind, or maybe you're spot on your Midmark. Like, here, this is a good example I would have. Like, if you're spot on your Midmark, but then you're way out on your ending jump or on your takeoff, and it's like, okay, maybe it's something on the second half of your run that's going on. Maybe you're tired, maybe your technique is going a little bit, you're dropping your knees, whatever, you're lunging, whatever it is. Like, so your Midmark can give you just more data to tell you,
right,
which part of my run am I having issues with. So, like, if your son is like having back pains because he's getting ripped off the ground, but like your takeoff is going to be the same number, if you don't have your Midmark, you're not going to know, okay, is it his first couple steps that are, or strides that are off, or is it the last couple strides? Like, you're not going to be able to know that unless you, like, if you know what the tempo that you're listening for. But if you have a Midmark, that'll let you know really well, like, hey, you're 3 feet over your mark right now, so we have to do something with your run, move you back a few inches, and reattack this thing. So it just gives you more data so that you know where you're messing up.
Shawn, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
Well, you're just talking about volume, and I was going to totally agree with you. People, if things start breaking down technically, I mean, you're bound to get hurt at that point too. Usually the hips start coming forward a little bit, and you start getting an anterior pelvic tilt. And then, your chest comes through, and then back start to hurt, and shoulders, timing gets so you're, sorry, phone went off.
No,
Wife's texting me. But yeah, when I've totally lost, volume, that's what we're talking about. When your technique starts to go, that just creates, positions you can take off, and that's essentially going to hurt you. That's where, I take a lot of reps from 1 and 2 lefts early on in my season, almost like a ton of them, just because the speed's slow enough where I do have technical things off a little bit. I'm not going to break, versus going back to my full approach, grabbing my biggest pull, and going, all right, let's just rip this up. And, my arm would get ripped off probably.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up the hips, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, and I'll stand up just to show people, but it's like, you don't want your hips to tilt forward like that. You got to keep your hips up when you're running. And it's like, you see that it's so common, like people lose their hips, they're running backside, and they just slam into it. And so like you're saying, if you try to correct that now from 5, 6, 7 lefts, that might be a little bit tough. Like you said, bring it into 1 or 2 lefts, you can start to work on that and really make a huge difference. Even this week, we had a new vaulter start coming into the club, and I've been really focusing on the hips and front side running mechanics. And like, she's kind of getting on these poles and grips that she's never got on from really short, which I'm glad. I think she's connecting the dots. She's like, oh my God, what's going to happen when I go to my full approach now? I'm going to be on huge poles. So that's super awesome. I have one more question, and I'm sure, Shawn, you probably got to go.
No worries.
So this question, I don't know how much we can all help, but someone asked, why is it more common to have a 1 foot peg gap at the top of the standards?
This makes your PR higher when you jump the bigger peg.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just because it's like it's an easier metric. I mean, just like have 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, nice and clean, like when you're at practices, it's like, okay, you can put 2 different bungees, 3 different feet, whatever it is, makes it easy. Where if you have pegs every 6 inches, it's like, yeah, it's great for when you're in, competition, except you're not supposed to go from one peg to another. Like you're actually supposed to keep it on the same peg. So you're really not even supposed to do changing. It's like, well, now they're all so close, and it's like, what's the point? Now it's like, they're all super close. So I think it's just
close. If like you hit a crossbar, they could like just hit each other and just stick on. The other thing is people are more likely to make a mistake and like mess up which peg it's supposed to be on. The other thing I would obviously assume is that the manufacturers it's a bigger cost. Like they've got to put more pegs. The pegs cost money, and they're like, whatever, this is just simpler. Otherwise, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have that answer either. If I'm thinking from a business perspective, it would make more sense that if the top peg only goes to 12, even if you put it a foot, at least you can move it back up that 6 inches to get that bar you can't get. But yeah, I never thought about that. That's weird. I know like at the elite competitions, they don't even have the second peg. All they have is the all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. Thanks for breaking my brain.
I remember even UCS one year, they started making it where the top of the standard was like slanted down so that you couldn't get the crossbar to stick on top of the standards. Because sometimes that happens. And in a crowd, like visually, you're like, oh my God, they made it. And they're like, no, it's on top of the standards. Everybody boos, and it's a rough situation. I guess we'll end the podcast. One, this has been an amazing episode. Why don't you guys tell everybody how they can reach out, or where they can follow you or listen to you? And again, thank you guys.
Shawn?
Yeah, so team-shoot.com has all my social media and everything you could probably find on there, and the YouTube blogs. So I would team-shoot.com, and you're good to go.
Also, everybody should buy that book. The pole vault toolbox is amazing. There's so many different drills on there. I mean, when people ask me, I always recommend that book. I also recommend Beginner to Bupka, but it's like those are the books. I feel like if you have those 2 books, that's a great way to start if you're trying to learn the pole vault. And again, Shawn, thank you for making that book.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Colin?
Yeah, I'm if you want to follow me or my podcast, it's at Track World News. We're actually going to have some pretty interesting stuff coming in March. Hopefully, fingers crossed, a website should be coming out sometime soon. And if you wanted to see me and my personal face, that'd be C_WAITZ 28 if you wanted to follow my stuff.
Awesome. For everybody that's listening or watching, thank you. Please hit subscribe on YouTube or Apple iTunes. That would be great. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's The Real Apex Vaulting, and we're Apex Vaulting on Facebook and Twitter. And again, we're going to be doing weekly podcasts, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. So just email us your questions at apexvaulting@gmail.com. Or you can also DM us on Instagram. Again, thank you guys for joining, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you.